Hi everyone, this week's episode is reviewing Starship and its flight testing number 2, the docking of the cargo resupply number 29 to the ISS and its payload, another proposal from ArianeGroup about reusability of spacecraft, and NASA and his SLS certification campaign of his RS-25, followed by this week's launches. On Friday the 9th, NASA and SpaceX cargo resupply CRS-29 autonomously docked to the ISS without incidents and is expected to reside there for about a month. The cargo of this spacecraft contains several payloads. The first payload is a laser communication from space to test such a technology to enhance data communication capabilities on the space station. A terminal mounted on the station's exterior that uses laser or optical communication based on infrared, very much like your TV remote control, in order to send high-resolution information to NASA's Laser Communication Relay Demonstration System, or LCRD, which is basically a satellite orbiting around the Earth at about 36,000 kilometers or 22,000 miles, which is a geostationary orbit. The LCRD then beams the data to ground stations in Haleakala in Hawaii and Table Mountain in California. NASA plans to use this technology to communicate with crafts around the Moon and Mars. The second payload is an atmospheric wave experiment device which uses an infrared imaging instrument to measure the characteristics, the distribution and the movement of atmospheric gravity waves. In simple terms, the detection of high altitude atmosphere changes would allow understanding the behavior of the low altitude climate and therefore much better predict the weather on Earth. The third device is the Aquamembrane 3 to test a more energy efficient way to filter and clean wastewater for reuse based on proteins found in biological cells known as aquaporins. This weekend, we expect the Starship flight test number 2 to take off from Boca Chica in Texas, since the FAA has provided SpaceX with a launch license. SpaceX informed the public that a flight test may occur on the 17th of November at the earliest, and even informed the media to come to Boca Chica to install their cameras ahead of the launch by Thursday the 16th. The marine exclusion zones have been updated both in the US and Mexico, around the Gulf of Mexico as well as in Hawaii. Moreover, the FAA has released the written re-evaluation of the Programmatic Environmental Assessment, and the US Fish and Wildlife Services have concluded that the deluge system may be used up to 30 times a year. Road closures have been announced from Friday the 17th through Sunday the 19th. I will cover this flight in depth in the next episode. Let us hope this flight will be successful, and Elon Musk has mentioned that they have fixed the issues from the first flight test and gives a 50% chance to reach orbit this time. It's going to be a momentous event without a doubt. ArianeGroup released this week their next space ambition. The lunar gateway that NASA and ESA are developing will be deployed in 2030s. It will serve as a base camp for activity on the lunar surface. In this context, SUSI could turn into a space train. For this scenario, a lunar version of the vehicle is coupled with a transfer module. It can thus reach the lunar orbital station, then return to Earth to land and be reconditioned for the next flight. You notice on the ArianeGroup footage that at least two sizes of SUSI reusable spacecraft are anticipated in the future by ArianeGroup. NASA has tested a second RS-25 engine at its Stennis Space Center near Bay St. Louis in Mississippi as part of a series of 12 tests for certifying the new changes made on this engine from Rocketdyne, destined to be used on SLS Artemis V and onwards. The test lasted 550 seconds at 113% of thrust and did not show any anomalies. The first test was carried out on the 17th of October. Currently, NASA is using slightly modified versions of the RS-25 from the shuttle program for its Artemis 1 all the way through 4, but new engines with an improved manufacturing method had to be built for Artemis 5 and on. On the 11th of November, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 Block 5 for its dedicated Sun-synchronous orbit rideshare mission called Transporter 9, its 9th transporter mission, for the launch pad 4E at Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Now, there were 113 satellites in total, released at an altitude of 530 km and 97.5 degree inclination, but 89 of those were launched by SpaceX, whilst the remaining ones were launched by space tugs that were going to other orbits and inclination for later deployment. One space tug, Vigoride, from Momentous Incorporation, based in the US, was also launched on Transporter 5 and 6 missions. Another one is ExoLaunch, which is distributed 35 or micro or nano satellites, basically offloading the launch from SpaceX to ExoLaunch. And 3 satellites were also new emission monitoring satellites, including the first commercial CO2 sensor from GHGSat. The first stage landed back to the launch site at landing zone 4 for its 12th time. November 12th, SpaceX launched a Falcon 9 encapsulating 2 O3b mPOWER satellites from SES out of his Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. Now, these satellites were next-generation high-throughput satellites for high-performance connectivity services to multiple sectors, including government, energy, and cruise sectors, as well as telecom companies and mobile network operators. They were built and tested by Boeing, featuring an all-electric propulsion system, custom solar arrays manufactured by Spectrolab, and software-defined payload with more than 5,000 steerable and fully shapeable beams per satellite. They were released in a medium Earth orbit at 8,000 km, which is 5,000 miles in altitude, and 0 degree inclination, meaning orbiting around the equator. SES is expected to cover 96% of the globe with a total of 11 of these satellites. The first stage was recouped for his 9th times and landed at 585 km downrange on the drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. The fairing halves flew for a 8th time for one and 9th time for the other. They were picked up by the ship Bob, some 818 kilometers away from the launch site. November 16, China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation launched a Long March 2C from its Yongquan Satellite Launch Center in China with a Heiyang 3-01 satellite on board. It is a new generation ocean color monitoring satellite to help improve understanding of marine waters, according to the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation. This week's image is coming from the James Webb Space Telescope using the high-resolution near-infrared light. of a pair of actively forming stars known as Her Big Arrow 46 and 47 in the constellation of Vela, some 1,470 light years away. The stars are buried deeply, appearing as an orange-white splotch. They are surrounded by a disk of gas and dust that continues to add to their mass. Her Big Arrow 4647 is an important object to study because it is relatively young, only a few thousand years old, and stars take millions of years to fully form. Targets like this also give researchers insight into how stars gather mass over time, potentially allowing them to model how our own sun formed. Actively forming stars ingest the gas and dust that immediately surrounds them in a disk. When the stars eat too much material in too short space of time, they respond by sending out two-sided jets along the opposite side or the opposite axis. The semi-transparent blue cloud is a region of dense dust and gas known as a nebula. James Webb's crisp near-infrared image let us see through its gauzy layers, showing off a lot more of Her Big Arrow 4647, while also revealing a deep range of stars and galaxies that lie far beyond it. The nebula's edges transform into a soft orange outline. Over millions of years, the stars in Her Big Arrow 4647 will fully form, clearing the scene. Now, blue objects with diffraction spikes are stars, and the closer they are, the larger they appear. White and pink spirals, galaxies that you see, sometimes appear larger than the stars, but are significantly farther away. The tiniest red dots are the oldest, most distant galaxies. So that was your episode of Espace News. I trust you learned something on the way. I highly recommend you watch Starship second flight tests this weekend. Have a great week and see you soon.